happening, everybody? And thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's guest is Jason Pierce, who presently plays with Our Lady Peace and has formerly worked with artists such as Justin Bieber, Paramore, and many more. Jason and I touch upon some of the tours from his past, recordings with some of the aforementioned artists, as well as hands down one of the more chilling tour stories I've heard from when he was in Indonesia. And we even talk a little bit about Guns N' Roses and the cult, rock and roll. Crash Bang Boom podcast can be found on iTunes Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Luminary, Google Play, Podbean, and Amazon Music Podcast, just to name a few. Feel free to check out any of the previous 240 plus episodes and give me a like, a subscription, and or a positive review, as the support is appreciated. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to release some vinyl, hit them up at NewOrleansRecordPress.com. Check out all the electroplating, mastering, design, packaging, and vinyl coloring options. And they even got a real-time quote generator to add it all up so you can keep tabs on all that madness. They also print 12 and 7-inch records in 150 and 180 gram variants, and they do small runs of 100 and larger runs up into the thousands. So hit them up, and that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. All right, so here we go. Without further ado, Jason Pierce, Our Lady Peace. Spiritual Machine Part 2 will be out and available everywhere soon, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for it. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yeah! All right, I'm here with Jason Pierce of Our Lady Peace. Jason, what's happening, my man?
You know, sitting in my house, we finally got back to work a couple weeks ago, and just taking a little bit of downtime before we head back out on the road in 2 days.
Nice, man. And I understand Our Lady Peace has a new record coming out. You know, it's funny. Every time I say Our Lady Peace, I want to say Our Lady Pierce, and because I'm thinking about your name and the band name, and I just
That's
can't.
funny.
My mind is getting a little fucked up over here with this, but I'll try to keep it straight.
I feel you. We just finished recording a record called Spiritual Machines 2, which is a follow-up to the 2000s record Spiritual Machines, which I was a huge fan of growing up. It's been a completely different process because usually, you know, we get in a room and play songs as a band.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because of COVID and all of the restrictions and half the band living in Los Angeles and half living in Canada, we've had to do the whole thing remote. So it's been kind of a learning curve of how to find the spark from each other separated.
For sure.
But that said, we've had the pleasure of working with a producer named Dave Siddick. He was in a band called TV on the Radio. He's produced like the Ya Ya Ya's and Weezer, a bunch of people.
Nice.
But we got to work with him, and that was just like a mind-blowing experience to see songs that we've written and demoed pretty much explode into something that is bigger than this band.
Cool. For those listening to this, I'm sitting here looking at you in your studio, which looks super cool. You got no shortage of keys, mixing board, monitors, guitars, basses, couch. It looks like a fat dog or cat back there hanging out.
That's just a big chihuahua. Yeah.
Okay, you got a chunky chihuahua. The Gordito. Where do you
Pretty
have?
much.
Are you set up to track drums there as well?
Yeah, this is just my control room. My live room's on the other side of the house.
Nice.
So in there, I've got like all my guitar amps hooked up remote, so I can like play in here. I got drums, my electronic drums, my piano, and all that stuff hooked up.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm good to record pretty much anything instantly, as long as my kid's not napping.
Wow, that's wild, man. And where are you? You're in Toronto?
Yeah. We moved just outside of the city the spring of 2019. So right before we had a kid, we moved to a little town called Aurora, which is just on the outskirts of Toronto.
Gotcha.
So we left the city life behind.
Yeah, just in time to have a kid and for a pandemic to shit the bed, and then you get to build your home studio.
Yeah, I actually built this home studio in 2 days when we moved into the house.
Really?
Because I had a record I was producing and I needed the studio to finish off overdubs.
Oh, wow.
So it was like this huge like rush to get it all done. Like we were doing flooring and the walls and all the panels and everything. Like it was just me, the bassist from Our Lady Peace, and our guitar tech that did all of it.
Wow, dude. And with the sheetrocking and everything, is it double sheetrock for in that
Everything?
Instance? Yeah, double everything, right?
Yeah. It was a process. So, you know, I'm hoping not to have to repeat the process too soon, but, you know, keep hold of this house.
Wow. So with this new record coming out that you mentioned, you were able to track the drums there in your house?
Yeah, it was actually kind of like we would demo the songs, and then the producer would get an idea of what he wanted to do with it, and then send back references. So from that point, I would go through and try to find drum sounds that were relevant to what he sent, as well as kind of parts that worked with what he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up being quite a lot more back and forth than you would do if you're sitting in a studio.
Sure.
But at the same point, it was pretty liberating to be able to sit here and come up with sounds
Yeah.
instead of being pressured, being like, we're paying thousands of dollars a day for a studio and like we only got a week to do the whole record or something like that. It's been like, we have the time, why not use the time and get it right?
Yeah. And on a single song, are you mixing up drums and drum sounds and drum sets even within a song?
100%.
Nice.
Like one of the songs, it's like multiple snare sounds plus electronic snare sounds. And some of the songs I actually took like the bottom head off my toms and went super like concert tom style.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I got this old 70s Gretsch kit that I used a bunch that way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I got a lot of drums.
Nice. So you got a mixture on a single track of modern drums, electronic drums, and vintage drums, just all across the board with different sounds.
100%. As much stuff as I could put in there. Just take it
Nice.
all.
Yeah. And I mean, did you switch up the micings, or was it pretty much sort of similar micings, or sometimes I've done it before where I'll have an electronic drum passage within a song, and then I'll go to my live drums, and in doing so, you hear the room open up. You start to
100%.
hear room mics, and you start to hear ambience, and sometimes transition in between those two can become a challenge.
Totally.
So was that something that, because when you start mixing up sounds, it's just they have different breaths, things change, and then to integrate those and make them sound natural within a single song can be tough.
Totally, especially if you're not in a room that is perfectly treated as well.
Right.
Like cymbal bleed and all that stuff ends up being such a huge problem when tracking drums.
Yes.
Most of the drums actually for this record were done cymbals separately.
There you go.
You'll never be able to tell really listening, but if you were to sit there with the actual files, like you could pull the cymbals right out and like just smash your ambient mics,
which is awesome.
it ends up sounding like Bonham pretty much at that point. But you
Totally.
can get that in almost any room if you do it with that kind of technique.
Yeah. I've done it once, and it's kind of funny when I listen back to the track, I realize as I was overdubbing the cymbal for this exact reason, because we wanted to go heavy in the room mics, and it was a small room, and the cymbal bleed becomes a problem, as you were saying. So to do that, when you separately track the cymbals, you can, as you said, push the drums, get big sounds without all that cymbal bleed blowing everything out. And but it's funny, when I listen back to that track, I realize I kind of waned off on it, and the cymbal goes a little bit out of time, and I was like, "Fuck it,
no way.
We'll just leave it." Fuck it. The drum sounded so cool, I was like, who cares?
Totally. And cymbals are really hard to time if you're trying to like use Pro Tools.
Yeah. And just playing them separately to your own playing, you would think, I'm just playing eighth notes. But you realize that it sometimes it gets a little wonky when you do that.
Oh, 100%. My first experience doing it was with a producer named Greg Norrie, who was the singer in a band called Treble Charger back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
He also produced like Sum 41 and like co-wrote all like their first few records.
Right
But I was doing a TV show called Mud Pit, and Derek from Sum 41 actually wrote a bunch of the songs for it.
Mm-hmm.
So like the intro song was very much like In Too Deep, which was really cool and like almost full circle to get to do something like that.
Sure.
But anyways, we ended up having to cut 2 seasons worth of music in 3 days in the studio.
Wow.
And this was my first experience where they were like, okay, we want to do cymbals separate from drums.
Yeah.
So my heart just like dropped. I was like, I've never done this in my life before. And I've never worked with this producer, and I'm doing TV work and all this. Like, I was young. It was terrifying.
Wow.
But we ended up knocking it out. And it was a really good experience to kind of grow the confidence to know that like I could separate those elements and like play the things separately, because it's a completely different wheelhouse.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Again, you would think in theory it sounds simple, and then when you start getting into it, you're like, just a little unexpected things are happening here.
Well, yeah, totally. As a drummer, because a lot of the time you're leaning on your eighth note going in your right hand to kind of subdivide where your left hand's going to hit.
Exactly.
And like, time feel and all those things. It's like, how do I play behind the beat if I don't have a constant meter on top?
Right.
All those little things.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, man. Well, you mentioned that you're kind of a little outside of Toronto, and
Yeah.
I've got a buddy that's in like the Regina, Saskatoon area, and I just love
Nice.
saying both Regina for obvious reasons, and then Saskatoon because it doesn't sound like it's a real place.
Absolutely.
He's out there, and apparently it's cold as hell out there, like in the winters. He said it can be
Oh, yeah.
absolutely just unbelievably brutal there. But
Yeah, that's kind of like, honestly, I find Canada that way overall.
yeah,
Like, we're just outside of Toronto where we don't get as cold weather, but like the extremes are ridiculous. Like, it's 40 degrees here today,
really,
like Celsius, but like
yeah.
it's so hot outside that like I can't even bear it. And I know in like 2 months' time, it's just going to be snow drifts and me like pulling my shoulder out trying to shuffle.
Right,
Like,
right. Do you do like Canadian outdoor activities? Do you like hunt moose and go ice fishing and play hockey? None of
none
the
of those
above.
things. None of those things. I chase my kid around
There you go.
and I play drums and write songs. That's pretty
Okay,
much all I do.
gotcha, gotcha. How old's your son?
He just turned 2 like 3 days ago.
Okay,
Yeah, we're in the thick of it in a good way.
I have two boys, and one's a little over one, and the other one's a little like 1.5 and 3.5. So you're in
Oh,
the in
nice.
between phase of both of them. But yeah, they're just starting to get to where
Totally.
they play with each other and can sort of entertain each other, which is nice to give us a break. But inevitably, the 3-year-old ends up hurting the 1-year-old, and then he's crying, and it's just he just it's not. I'm an only child, so I didn't have to deal with siblings, so I'm watching it. It's all kind of foreign to me, but the bigger one definitely kind of enjoys beating up on the little one. I guess that's the way this goes, right?
I'm the younger child, so I can vouch for that. Like,
You're one of how many?
just 2. I have an older sister, but she was
Okay,
a tough older sister.
really?
Oh yeah,
That's
I love
wild.
her, but yeah.
Yeah. Where did you grow up in the Toronto area?
I grew up in London, which is a couple hours away from Toronto, but I
Okay.
moved up to Toronto when I was 19. I was in a small town, and it was pretty much in my mindset impossible to take my career to a level that would be sustainable
Yeah.
in such a small town in such a small circle.
Right. Right.
So, I ended up just becoming friends through networking with a bunch of musical directors, and then like gigs just started to happen over a long period of time.
Wow. Did you go to audio engineering school at any point, or you've just been learning on the job?
Yeah, I've just been learning on the job. My mom and dad were actually in the industry. My mother was a lighting director. My dad was a sound engineer,
Oh, wow.
live sound engineer.
Oh,
So I grew up around, like, I teethed on mic cables. That's what my dad told me, at least. So
that's
I'm gonna take
wild.
that with me.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Embrace that one.
Right? Oh,
That,
I see it now because my kid's like chewing on my cables.
yeah.
I'm like, buddy, I don't want to buy new cables.
Full circle.
Yeah, it is.
What age did you start recording stuff on your own, and what technology were you using? Were you using little 4-track cassette recorders, or what were you recording on?
Yeah, I think the first thing I had was an old Tascam 4-track recorder,
Yep.
but I soon moved on to recording digitally. I think I had Adobe Audition, if you remember that program.
Yes.
It was before I got into Pro Tools or Logic or any of that stuff, and I just had a 1/8 inch input on my compact laptop, which was a 2-channel input, so I could do
Yeah.
a left and right out of an old Soundcraft Series 2 I think I had in my basement, and I
Wow.
just like mic'd everything up and had everything coming out into a stereo channel. So that was how I was actually like producing music back in the day.
Wow. And what age? Around what age was that?
Oh man, probably like 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The 4-track was probably younger. I was probably more like 10 when that was happening,
Yeah.
but I started playing when I was 4, so I already had a bit of time.
Gotcha. It's something that I learned later in life. I've been playing for 30 years now, and only in the last maybe 10 or so started getting into kind of producing my own music and recording and miking and
Awesome.
electronic music and, MIDI shit and all of that whole crazy world. And it has affected my playing. And I always think
Totally
that
does.
some of the most quote unquote musical drummers often have some sort of a production background, having sifted through all the tracks, heard what works, edited it, changed it, mic'd it. When you go through all the variables that ultimately compose this recorded music, you get a better sense of what can work and what is often called quote unquote musical again. So,
100%. Well, if you think about music like a puzzle, it's hard to get the whole picture of the puzzle if you're only holding one piece, and that one piece is the drums.
correct.
And it's a big piece of the puzzle, and the rest of the puzzle doesn't make sense without it.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of have the whole picture,
Yeah.
and having an understanding of how things fit together and why you're going to play a certain thing under a vocal or why a note's going to be played sustained or anything like that. It all just, it relies on each other to be able to make the whole picture.
Yeah, absolutely. With as far as the other instruments that you play and have, et cetera, in the house, are there any of them that are as strong as your skill on the kit necessarily?
Nowhere near, but
Nowhere near.
I've been playing piano since I was like 15 years old. I'm 36 now, so there's been some time,
Right.
but I've never performed a show on piano or keys
Yeah,
or
exactly.
anything but drums. And honestly, the thought of it terrifies me.
Yeah, I bet.
Like,
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I have a recurring dream, nightmare, really. There's a couple that I have, but one of them is I'm on stage and I'm either playing guitar or bass, and I think I can fool the audience, and then like a key change happens, and I don't know where I need to be on the fretboard to happen, and then I'm just playing clam sandwiches left and right, and then the audience is
Just
starting
flailing.
to see it. Just I'm fucking flailing in front of an audience, and I know it, they know it, and that's a recurring nightmare that I have to this day.
that's horrible.
It sucks. I'm ready to not have it anymore. It definitely
Yeah,
sucks.
pretty much. Yeah, I just wouldn't sleep at this point.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh man. Well, it's always interesting talking to people that kind of operate in these both the pop world and then on like sort of larger productions. You know, I mean, I know you've worked with like Justin Bieber and stuff, so it'd be cool to talk to you about
Yeah.
that. But
Absolutely.
so maybe just even starting there, tell me a little bit about the experience of working with him.
Honestly, the Bieber stuff I did was pretty limited, and it was mostly TV stuff. So I didn't
Okay.
get to see the actual production stuff with that.
Ah,
But it was great. It was pretty eye-opening just to see how tight those circles are and how precious they are with giving up material before it's released.
uh-huh.
I played on the debut of a song called Baby, and it hadn't been released anywhere yet or anything like that. So I had to learn this song on the spot at the TV studio from a backing track. They wouldn't even give me the actual song because they didn't want the melody shown to anybody. They didn't want anything like that.
Damn.
So yeah, it was literally just being like quickly trying to do a cheat sheet of arrangement. And then Justin walked in and we played through it once before taping.
Damn.
Yeah, there was some pressure there, but I've had to deal with more pressure since then. Working with Chantal Kreviatsik, who is my singer's wife, she likes to kind of do things way more loosey-goosey. We were playing at David Suzuki's birthday, and she just finished recording a song that day. So we were walking up to the stage, and she just held her phone up to our ears.
Really?
And she's like, oh yeah, we're not going to play the songs that we've been rehearsing. We're going to play this tonight.
Oh,
And literally not even time to make a chart.
right.
Literally just like, okay, verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown, double chorus out. I can handle that.
Yeah,
Like, you know, I can make it through that.
sure.
It was fine. But those are the type of moments that as like a musician or as a drummer, like I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love actually being stretched and challenged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as it then goes back again to a little bit of the production experience previously, and at the very least, an understanding song form. So again, if you weren't going to
Totally.
make a chart, you could at least say, this is the tempo, this is the general vibe, and here at the very least is the song structure, so I can adjust dynamically what happens throughout that, knowing at least that there's this simple map of what's going down.
100%. And then it's just kind of deciphering if you drop out at certain parts or anything like that.
Right.
And you're like, okay, so it's, I drop out on the 3 and I'm back in on the 1. It's like, okay, I can, you know, it's not rocket science.
Right.
Unless, you know, it's progressive rock and then it's rocket science. But
Exactly.
like,
Yeah. That's funny, man. You also, I know, played with Paramore. I don't know too much about them. I think the band was formed in utero. They wore diapers for most of the run. They're super young. Were you the old guy in the band?
I was the second oldest or third oldest, I think.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, the bassist at the time was Jeremy Davis, and I think he was the oldest guy in the band. But yeah, I was definitely older than Haley and older than Taylor and all those guys.
Yeah.
But that was a crazy gig. Like
Yeah.
I was again a fan of that band before I even got a call for that, and I ended up having to knock on the manager's door probably like 100 times before I got an audition.
Wow.
But at that point, it was like they were one of the biggest bands out there, and they had their pick of anybody they wanted.
Wow.
And I was actually replacing Josh Freese on the gig.
Yeah.
So like It was like it was terrifying enough.
Yeah, Aaron Gillespie, I believe, also played with them, right?
Yeah, he was right after me, or a couple people after me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. I ended up waking up one morning and I just had like an email from their tour manager with flights being like, "You're coming down to jam with the band." It was
Oh,
like 2 days later. I got on a plane, went down, and I like learned like the whole catalog just in case.
wow.
I ended up jamming with him for like an hour or so in this little tiny rehearsal room, and then like we hung out at a barbecue. And I flew home, and the next day I had an email saying I had the gig.
Wow. That's wild, man.
I was shaken. I was like, "Do I have this? What does this mean? What is life?" But
Yeah, for real.
I jumped up and down and screamed like, the most excited person on earth for a few minutes.
Absolutely. How long did you play with him, and then what were some of the gigs that y'all played? Were there some particularly memorable gigs that y'all played?
Oh, there were so many. I was with him for almost a year, and we toured like everywhere, everywhere. Like we started in Europe, and the first show was in Prague.
Nice. It's a beautiful city.
Oh, it was amazing. Sum 41 was actually on that gig opening up, which was crazy again because they're like, local guys for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was 60 or 70,000 people.
Damn.
It was just this mass amount of people, and like I was so nervous because I think we had done 2 or 3 days of rehearsals in Nashville and then flew out.
Ooh.
Like I'm being the new guy. Like it was
Yeah.
crazy.
Did you have a good bit of like backing tracks, or what were you monitoring? Was it all
Nothing.
clicked out?
Yeah, there was click, but there was no tracks at all. It was
Ah.
all just like, if there's a tambourine being played, then the auxiliary guy is going to be playing the tambourine.
Wow.
Yeah, there was, what was it? It was 3 guys up front and then me and 2 other guitar players in the back. So they had like a fairly large band to
Right.
actually be able to support all the parts and everything,
Yeah.
which was amazing because so few bands in this day and age operate like that.
Totally.
Everyone's kind of like, we have to sound like the records. So the parts we aren't playing are going to be put in the box.
Yeah.
And that's just standard, like.
So sounds like a pretty eye-opening experience in more ways than one. Not only the size of the shows that you were playing, but also minimal rehearsal going into this in front of, again, big crowds and the whole thing. That sounds like a hell of an experience, though.
Oh, it was amazing. And I was dealing with like some wrist issues too from improper technique.
Ah.
So it was just like painful and like anxiety being like, oh my God, it's like my first day on a new gig and my wrist doesn't work.
Oh shit. What did you do to
Yeah.
resolve that? Was it a posture thing, a height thing, a setup of the kit?
I was playing improperly.
Oh, okay.
Like it was just a technique thing. And it's something that like kind of occurred to me for probably an 8 or 9 year stretch on and off. It was happening. And then I just completely changed how I play drums.
Did you go to someone for that, or did you?
No, I'm completely self-taught. So
Okay.
I'm at the mercy of my own bad technique, and I'm the only person to blame.
Yeah.
But when I came into the OLP camp, Jeremy Taggart, the old drummer, was a huge influence of mine, and he had much more of a touch and kind of like a jazz flair to him, which I was huge into jazz in my teenage years. Like I studied all that stuff, but like I didn't play that way in my 20s.
Sure.
So when I changed how I played, it was more of like, hitting less rims, lifting my sticks up, hitting with or using my fingers instead of my wrists and my arms,
Sure.
that type of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think I sounded nearly as good as I do now because of the way I used to play. It's the drums just don't breathe the same
For sure.
if you're playing through them instead of playing off of them.
Yeah. So that was also obviously a realization. It's funny that literal pain can end up leading for you to make these adjustments that ultimately will prolong your ability to play the instrument, because you sustain
100%.
You will fuck yourself up if it's bad for.
Yeah, and you're done then. Yeah.
Right.
100%. But having my own studio space was kind of the first step to that for me, because I was able to put everything under a microscope in a way that I couldn't do just sitting in a rehearsal spot with a kick and snare mic up.
Right.
So, I don't think I could have got to the same place without having those things.
Yeah. From touring with some of these artists that you've worked with, bands you've joined, etc. Do you recall your first tour?
Yeah. My first tour was in a band called The Weeknd. And it's not like the big pop artist The Weeknd.
The Weeknd,
It's
right.
it was a small pop punk band from London, Ontario.
Okay.
We actually own the name The Weekend. That's why Abel spells it the way he does.
Ah.
Yeah. We're responsible for that as well.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But that tour was crazy. I had just like come out of my parents' basement and they blew up overseas.
Oh.
So my first tour was in Indonesia and we were doing like soccer stadiums.
No way. Really?
Oh yeah, it was insane. It was like the most insane experience of my life. I didn't make a cent. Like I think I made like per diems on that tour, but like I got to play massive shows to the point where like I had to come back and go to clubs and be like, oh, this isn't just reality now. Like,
right. Whoa, that's crazy that was your first tour.
yeah, it was insane. We got flown into these venues in helicopters from like the rooftops of our hotels, and like it was crazy. Like nothing has even been close to that since. Like,
and that's the first one out of the gate.
Yeah.
How many shows did y'all play on that run?
We were actually the second band in history to tour the entire place. It was Deep Purple was the only other band that had done it.
Whoa.
Which is crazy. We were there for, I think, 5 weeks.
Really?
Like we hit every little island, not every island because there's so many, but like most of the main islands. It was such an experience.
Damn. Did y'all have downtime to where you could go check out where you were touring, or was it all kind of like get in, set up, get ready for the show, play the show, on to the next one?
No, there was quite a lot of like daytime downtime that we got to do so much stuff. Like I got to go to these ancient temples and I got to like go shopping in with like local Indonesians and like all this stuff.
And you were how old?
Oh, I was 19.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, man. It was crazy.
Wow. Yeah. I in sort of researching the bands that you had played with, I saw The Weeknd, and immediately, as you mentioned, I thought the artist, but it made them, specifically said that the band, not the artist. But I had no idea that it was even like that. That's blowing my mind that was your first time out, and especially where you went, and that coupled with the shows, and then you're getting helicoptered around. That's nuts, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was an experience, that's for sure. Like I won't
Wow.
forget it. So many things happened on that tour though. Like I got stuck in an elevator,
Really?
which was like one of my worst fears ever.
Yeah.
We were in a plane and the engines cut out in a thunderstorm,
Oh,
but like
God.
they finally came back on and we were okay.
Oh.
And right after we took off, the tsunami hit.
Whoa, dude.
Like we were in the air when the tsunami hit.
No way.
Yeah. So it's like the weirdest coincidences of like timing and everything with that. Like,
Wow, that is truly crazy, man. And I mean, there were so many crazy sort of side stories that preceded that. I mean, I remember 60 Minutes did an episode where they spoke to this nomadic boat culture, and they all just live out there on the sea. And like their kind of older shaman had noticed that the sea had receded, and he had said, we need to go further out because something bad is about to happen. And they managed to evade the sheer destruction of it. And there were reports of animals, elephants and other animals going to higher ground, knowing that something was going wrong. And then in the end, man, it was so catastrophic. If I recall correctly, it was like over 200,000 people died in that. I mean, it was just unbelievably catastrophic.
totally. And like the gravity of the fact that we had played all these massive stadium shows and all those towns were hit by the tsunami.
Ooh.
So yeah, it was like getting home being like, in a lot of ways, we were some people's last experience. It's like a heavy burden to actually carry that way,
Whoa. Damn, dude. Boy, that you experienced a lifetime of events within a single tour that was your first. And that's just unbelievable, man.
I know. It's like I've never been stuck in an elevator on any other tour.
Yeah, for real. Oh, wow. That is wild and terrifying and surreal. All the things.
Totally, man. Totally.
Man, you blew my mind with that one. With Our Lady Peace, when did you get that gig, and like how did you come up with how'd you end up with that gig in the first place?
Well, I toured opening for OLP back in, oh God, I don't even know what year it was now. It was probably like 2005, 2006. I toured opening for him. But when Taggart left the band, I got a call from the manager to meet up with Duncan, the bassist, to have a coffee with him. So this was 2014, I believe now.
Yeah.
So we ended up just like chatting, eating pastries, drinking coffee, and like broing down. And then a couple days later, we jammed, and I got hired to come out and do like a summer full of shows with them. So it started out being like a hired gun on it, not being like an actual member or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it just evolved into being a friendship and a partnership between us. And like they've embraced me as a songwriter and as a drummer. So it's like I couldn't be in a better position to like actually be able to expand myself,
Yeah.
you know? So
Totally.
yeah, man, it's great.
Nice. Once you got the gig, what were some of the challenges? I mean, I know the band's been around for a while. I mean, since the mid 90s. So there could potentially be a lot of music that you would have to acquaint yourself with. So
There's so many songs.
yeah,
there's so
that's
many
going to be a
songs.
lot. So was that? I mean, was
Yeah.
that one of the challenges? And if not, or if so, what were some of the other ones as well that when getting into it?
Absolutely. Yeah, the vast amount of material was one thing. Trying to do justice Jeremy Taggart's drum parts, I think, is probably the biggest responsibility I have,
Uh huh.
especially just because like he came up with parts that, you know, a lot of people took up drums because of,
Yeah.
you know, myself included. Like I would not be playing drums probably if it wasn't for that guy. I
Wow.
grew up playing to his records,
That's
you know,
crazy.
and those are our records now, but like at the same point, it's, you know, I don't think it would be fair to not give credit to that and to try to pay homage to him by playing them
Mm-hmm.
the best I can, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, I guess, because initially you were brought on sort of as a hired gun, and then you're just learning those parts. But then
Yeah,
going forward, I assume having that sort of as the foundation of your playing, you would end up having some of those same qualities in your own playing in that band, having both been influenced by him and learned his style within those songs, and then carrying the band forward.
totally, man. Like, you know, Taggart was a huge one for me. On top of that, like Josh Freese has been my number one since I was a little boy.
He's amazing.
I remember, I remember seeing the video for Judith for the first time, and my mind just blew.
Yeah.
Like he did something on drums that no one else was doing, and I don't still to this day think anyone plays like him.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. I think as a drummer, the most important thing you can do is find your own voice.
Uh huh.
You know, and that's a guy right there that, you know, Josh Freese, Dave Grohl, John Bonham.
Of course.
That's a caliber of player that has that voice, that has been able to figure out who they are and be confident in who they are.
Uh huh. Yeah, Josh is an interesting one as well because I know he's done so many sessions. There are ones that he could be probably just about anybody, and he has a fairly ambiguous approach just for the sake of just supporting what's happening. But then I know
Totally.
he played on this Suicidal Tendencies record, and I believe he's the drummer on The Art of Rebellion, that Suicidal
Ooh.
Tendencies record. And that was kind of the first time I heard him. I remember thinking, this dude is bad. And that was kind of the first time I heard him. And he's ripping on that record. So,
Oh man, I gotta check that one out. I've actually never heard that.
yeah. It's, I mean, I grew up on Suicidal Tendencies. I was always a fan of them. And then, so I just would get their cassette tapes when they would come out. And that's one of the ones that would have came out. I was struck by like the drumming being a different level than what had preceded it, you know?
Totally.
So,
Yeah. I feel that, man.
absolutely, man. We talked a little bit about the record, the new one, the process of recording it separately and kind of working with the producer. It sounds like it's definitely an interesting and different experience in putting a record together.
Absolutely.
And because of that, it sounds like the process also sort of influenced the record maybe in a different direction than what you had thought, you know, which is cool. Like,
Absolutely.
so now you've got this thing that wasn't necessarily anticipated, but I imagine everybody's digging on it, right? I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, you know, a completely different way to do it, but I'm so proud of the record. I can't wait for it to come out. I believe it's coming out in October now.
Gotcha. I'm psyched to hear it,
So-
knowing just like all of the different drum stuff that went into it and kind of
Totally.
just digging it on a sort of production level alone, you know?
Absolutely, man.
But as far as playing gigs with them, did you recently played a gig? You got back out, played an actual real gig in front of real live people. What was that like?
That was insane. I live in Ontario, so pretty much one of the strictest places you can be in Canada
Yeah.
for regulations, all that stuff. Like we're still like not fully open in any way.
Wow.
Like, and they won't roll the opening out anymore as it is right now. So we're just kind of like you know, we're allowed to play shows, but everything has capacity limits. And there's mask mandates and all that stuff.
Right.
But we were in Saskatoon about a week and a half ago, and we got to play at their exhibition. So it's like their fair. It was a race car track with a like stadium seating type thing. Awesome. Like to actually be back in that position, to be on a stage, it's unbelievable the way I felt.
Yeah.
I had goosebumps on my arms during sound check.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
it's crazy. But when the show actually came to happening, we walked on stage, and I wasn't expecting this, but it was like 10,000 people with no masks on standing in front of me.
Yeah.
And going from a place that has mask mandates to go buy a coffee to going to like 10,000 people screaming in our faces. I'm just like, I feel safe-ish, but like, you know, I'm double vaxxed, but like, I don't know how far that's going to get me with 10,000 people screaming in my face.
I know, right? When it comes to playing like a set, what is the general duration and or like how many songs do y'all? I know that would change per set, but generally speaking, like duration and song.
Yeah, for a headline set, we usually play like 80 to 90 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, and then like if it's an opening thing, we'll do 45, but like we don't generally do a lot of opening stuff. In 2019, we did a long, almost 100-date tour with Bush and Live.
Wow.
The States. We were the support on that. So that's like, I think pretty much the only support thing I've done with OLP besides like when we toured with Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. That also I wanted to talk to you about. That's cool that you went out with Live. You know, that's a band that I also grew up on. I remember the first
Awesome.
record I really dug. And then when Throwing Copper came out, that was like a huge record for them. And I really
Totally.
dug that. That's cool that you got to go out with them and Bush and do that whole thing. It's funny though, no matter how much you love a band, I would imagine after the 100th gig, you've probably seen it enough.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, you've probably heard your own music enough at that point too, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. Well, like, yeah, our current single that we released, it just went to radio, I think about 6 weeks ago. We finished that song mid 2019.
Yeah.
So it's again that kind of feeling, being like, I've heard this song a billion times and it's just gone to radio.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it's my kid's favorite song, and he's been dancing to it before it was even released.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Nice. You mentioned Guns N' Roses, man. I love it that y'all got to go out and open with them. I saw them on that tour when they came through. We saw them down in New Orleans actually, and they had the Cult.
Oh, nice.
The Cult open in Forum, which was cool because I also grew up on the Cult, and it's wild because like 1987, the Cult puts out Electric, and then Guns N' Roses puts out Appetite for Destruction. So it's just like these massive, monumental, killer, badass rock and roll records that both came out in '87. But I love it that you
That's
got
a good year.
Yeah, it was. I love it that you got to go out with them. Were you able to watch some of those shows from the side stage, or just kind of hang back and watch them?
I got to watch a lot of the shows. Their security was super tight.
Oh, I
like,
bet.
Could not get even near the stage.
Wow.
Frank, their drummer, became a friend of mine. He is a super sweet guy and an amazing drummer.
Yeah.
He actually would stand like side stage during our sets.
Nice.
Which was intimidating, but at the same point, amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that tour was mind-opening to be able to see the scale of production. That was just
For
immense.
It was
Like,
massive. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was like 2-hour show with screens and everything that you could think of. Like it had it all. But again,
yeah, and I think they were leapfrogging those shows too, because like the production was so big they couldn't physically get it built in time for the next show. So it would be like 2 shows down, you'd be on the same stage. It was just like
unbelievable, man. And I mean, yeah, like one of those stage setups would be obviously expensive. If you have 2, double, holy shit!
Right?
And just the crews setting them up, like that is a massive, like money being thrown at that, you know.
100%. The only time I've seen more tour buses was Warp Tour, and that's because it's everyone's buses, not just one band's buses.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's unbelievable. That's really cool that you got to go out with them, though. I love that.
Yeah, man, that's bucket list. 100% bucket list. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like if you started playing when you were about 4, what were you listening to at that time? I mean, it sounds like you were listening to some of the stuff that you would go on to play with and influenced by, which is trippy. Was there any other stuff? I mean, you mentioned Bonham. Were you playing along with Zeppelin, or was it classic rock, or more pop punk stuff, or what were you into?
I was really into the Cult and Guns N' Roses, to be honest.
There
Those
you
were
go.
kind of like my first like loves when it came to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Sonic Temple, that record.
Oh,
is,
it's badass. So good. I
Yeah.
have that on vinyl. I still listen to it all the time. I love Electric
amazing.
and Sonic Temple. They're totally badass.
Totally. After that, I got into OLP as they came out. But like I said a little bit earlier, I really got into jazz when I was in my teenage years. Brian Setzer, like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, like more swing stuff, plus like classics like Coltrane and all that stuff. But that really kind of led me to playing piano, because I ended up taking a jazz class in high school a second time, but taking it on piano just to try to expand what I was doing.
Yeah. So that's to this day, I would imagine on the technical side and on the music theory side, it's one thing to learn about chords. It's another thing to be able to modulate through them and improvise. And once you start really wrapping your head around what it takes to be like a world-class improviser and blow through all the chord changes and everything else, it's hard, and it's amazing that there are people that are that good at it. And generally speaking, a lot of theory is in their heads one way or another
100%.
to be able to navigate that,
Yeah, and they've just like done so much repetition on it that it's in their hands.
Yes.
Like somehow it's moved down.
Totally. Yeah. I've always loved, I mean, it's funny. It's the thing like rock is almost, you have the symphonic world where there's no improvisation. You have the rock world where there's very little. And then you have jazz, which is tons of it. And it's kind of funny that like, to listen to those disparate worlds and know that rock is almost in between the symphonic and the jazz world. It has the bombast of some of the symphonic stuff, but it's more simplified. And then you've got jazz on the other end. But again, it's all about, for me, and it always has been, listening to all that stuff and sort of incorporating it one way or another, just sort of embedding it in your skull.
100%, man. Yeah, it's all about variety and being able to, again, like stretch yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to grow if you're not stretching.
Yeah. Again, I mean, to this day, I've been playing for 30 years, and I can sit down and just sort of rip solos here and there, but then I'll watch, like some of these jazz guys, or just even like modern jazz guys, any of those, and it's unbelievable how good they can be in that improvisational world, and just being like, play a solo over this, and they don't fuck up. Like, I'm only going to be able to play so many bars before I stumble on myself and fuck it up somewhere, So that's amazing. Like, the skill set of that is just, it really blows my mind.
Yeah, man. Like, just being able to speak that flawlessly with a language.
Yes. Yeah. And just flow through it without just train wrecking it,
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, man. Well, man, it was good talking to you, man. I appreciate the time, and looking forward to hearing this record. Again, it sounds like y'all really did some cool and it's semi-experimental things within it. And I mean, that was one of the things about it with COVID happening, at least on the silver lining, was that people did take more time to maybe experiment. And at that point, you didn't have the weight of knowing we've got this tour right now, we got to get this. People started developing their home studios. About that. And I think a lot of the music that's going to come out of it, I think we're going to have some really cool productions, some really experimental stuff, and a sort of a new wave of just all kinds of interesting music that's going to come of it. That's kind of the silver lining of it.
Absolutely. That's an opportunity to push the envelope.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So not all bad.
Yeah, for real. Right on, man. We'll enjoy the home studio. I look forward to hearing the new record, and good luck getting back out there. If you come through Salt Lake City, man, let me know. We'll catch up.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too, man. All right, everybody. Hope y'all enjoyed the chat, and thanks to Jason for hanging and rapping about that new record and the process that went into it, and of course that totally insane story from his time in Indonesia. It's just unbelievable. We'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm going to skip one next week, so we'll catch you on the following one if that's the case. Crash, bang, boom.